it's the climb, huh? It does feel like that sometimes, doesn't it? It's always going to be an uphill battle. In Unity, we don't actually believe that it's always going to be an uphill battle. I want to be really clear about that. But I also want to be really clear that it can feel like that, right? It can actually feel like that sometimes. So, Ben is an inspiration for me. And I have his permission to share what I'm going to share. I'm not just talking out of school. Ben was diagnosed. He got a diagnosis. We're just going to leave it at that. He got a diagnosis at the end of May of last year. And he leaned into this teaching. He leaned into love. He leaned into community. And the treatment that he was getting was working. And it was this, this demonstration of what we know and believe in this teaching, that healing is possible, that wholeness, even in the midst of something that doesn't seem like wholeness, is possible. And then in December, the treatment that was facilitating wholeness actually became toxic in and of itself. And it was a real test of faith, as Ben has shared with me. It was an opportunity for him, after feeling like he was doing so well. I'm sure we can all relate to this, right? We get faced with something and we feel like we surmount it, and then all of a sudden, feels like we're not even just back where we were before, but that we're even further back than we had even imagined possible. And it's in those moments, particularly in those moments, that it is so important that we keep fresh before us our moments of high resolve. That we keep fresh before us the truth of what we know and what we believe, and we activate that faith. And Ben is a living example of that faith activated. Look at him up here singing away. You would never have known that in December he was really struggling. He's back at work now. He's back at work. And he's not the only one in our community. Our very own Michael Grossman just got 5 years cancer-free. So it doesn't matter whether it's a health diagnosis, it doesn't matter what it is that's coming up for you right now, but there is this space where we just feel like this. Right? It's just what it feels like. Can we move whatever it is that we're trying to move within us? Can we shift something that we are called to become? And sometimes it does feel like, Sisyphus trying to push it up. For me, actually, lately, how it's shown up is more like this. Or I just feel like I'm spinning in the same old, same old. It feels like I'm going somewhere because I'm moving, but I'm really not. Right? I'm really not. So however that shows up for you, however that experience is, I always like to bring Howard Thurman's piece, which is an anchor for me. I love Keep Fresh Before Me in the moments of my high resolve, because particularly in February, where did all of those January intentions go? Are they actually still active in your life? Have you kept that resolve fresh before you? It's usually right about now where things are starting to get a little frayed. They're starting to show that wear and tear, as he said, right? And we don't do it on purpose. It's not as if it's just sort of the dust and the grit of the journey, right? And that's part of it, is it's not flagrant. It's not something that's huge that we can instantly call ourselves to sort of navigate. It's this sort of slow erosion of something within us. So how do we keep fresh before us our moments of high resolve? Well, I know in these moments when I am feeling like this, when I am feeling overwhelmed, when I am feeling as if everything has pulled out from underneath me, when I am feeling as if I just don't know what is next, it's because I'm losing spiritual perspective. I'm losing my capacity to hold what is happening in that larger container. So it's as if all I'm seeing is the top of the iceberg. And I'm so focused on the top of the iceberg, it is so consuming to me that I am missing the fact that that is what's actually present and available as my life. The spiritual perspective is everything that seems to be underwater. It is the seeming invisible. And yet when we practice this teaching enough, we begin to realize that we make the invisible visible. We are the ones who are making that which is an idea, a principle, a concept. We are the ones who are making it real in time and in space. So when you find yourself feeling uninspired, when you find yourself feeling blah, when you find yourself just feeling sort of, like it's sometimes I'll be like, yeah, it's all good. Is it really? Is it really all good? I don't know if it's really all good right there, right? When it's really all good, I'm like, yeah, my life's great. Things are moving. I'm great. Things are good. Yeah, that's not what we settle for in this teaching. We are continually called to move beyond that. I would actually call it the mediocrity of what can show up in our life. We are called to a level of excellence. We are called to a level of commitment that is powerful and joyful. Hey, Tom. So, how do we refresh ourselves? How do we, when we need to keep fresh before us our moment of high resolve? And I love that this is like a button you would see right on your computer. Refresh. Because that's what we need. We need a reboot. We need to realign ourselves. It's like we need to run that diagnostic, the Norton virus diagnostic, and figure out what on earth has gotten in there that's sending up error messages. We have to refresh. We have to refresh our understanding. So, what do we come back to? When we're trying to refresh ourselves, we want to come back to the foundation of it all. Really. Like, don't mess around with the stuff that's sort of up here. You want to go right to the very heart of what it is that in unity we believe and that we teach. The foundational spiritual principles. And one of the things that became very clear in the class yesterday, which was awesome, by the way, is what exactly is a spiritual principle? We talk about it all the time here, right? We talk about spiritual principle, activate spiritual principle. Well, what is it really that we're talking about? So we're talking about a fundamental statement of truth about the absolute. We're not talking about a statement of truth about my relative human experience. Can you feel the difference? We're really talking about a statement of truth about the absolute, that which is immutable and unchangeable. It is a constant. And the beauty of the fact that it's a constant is that you can rely on it. It's a constant. It's never going to not be there. It's never going to sort of alter what it is. You can rely on the consistency and the constancy of spiritual principle. And the next piece is that it's neutral, right? It's neutral. It is not good, not bad, it just is. It's an is thing. How you use it, how you activate it can be for your greatest good, and it can also be for not necessarily your greatest good. Because we are creating always. Whether you're doing it consciously or not, we are always creating. So when we become conscious of these spiritual principles that we can access, that are available to us, just the same way electricity is available to us. Electricity can be used for good or for bad. It can warm our homes, it can bring light to our life, and it can also be used as an electric chair. The electricity itself is neutral. It is the way that we activate it, and that's where we have choice. And what is spiritual principle? It is the part that was under the water. It's the invisible being made visible. And how do we know if it's invisible? How do we know it? Well, we know it by looking around at what is visible. We look at what's visible and we go, oh, there's beauty. And there's more beauty. And there's more beauty. And there's more beauty. And there's more beauty. So somewhere back of all of that beauty that is transitory in our time and in space, the flower dies, right? Right? Somewhere back of that, though, is this absolute constant idea of beauty that keeps showing up, that keeps showing up. So, where is your attention in your life? Are you focused on the spiritual perspective, or are you focused on what you can see and taste and touch and feel? And our culture, that is huge. We put so much emphasis on what we can touch and what we can feel and what's real, and right? We have such we're overextended in that direction. So where is your attention? Are you actually looking at your life through the spiritual perspective? Are you seeing whatever is happening as your life from that understanding of the absolute? And then what are you looking for? Because we know that whatever we place our attention on grows in our consciousness. So if you're placing your attention on all the ways that things are not going to work, guess what? That is exactly what you're going to see. That's exactly what's going to show up. This is why we understand ourselves to be architects of our own experience. So, what do you see? What do you see? Can you see them both at the same time? Sort of, right? But you'll notice you're kind of moving back and forth. You're kind of moving back and forth between the profile and the straight on, and the profile and the straight on. And then maybe you'll have these moments of like, oh, I kind of see it's both. But it's a stretch, right? This is the muscle that we are developing when we step into spiritual practice. We are activating our capacity to be able to see and know that there is always another perspective. There is always the invisible behind the visible that we are being invited to understand, to see, to acknowledge, to recognize. And, like, can we hold them both? Can we integrate and truly be whole beings, our humanness and the fact that we are actually spiritual beings? That's ultimately what I believe is our purpose, is the integration of all that we are. And that's when we get to show up as our most authentic self. That's where authenticity arises from. When our spiritual understanding isn't fighting, or actually I should say our human understanding isn't fighting the spiritual truth of who we are. That's when all of a sudden integration becomes possible. That's when growth and healing and heart space and the evolution of our consciousness becomes possible. Here's another one. So can you see both? Right? And it takes a moment. It takes a moment. When we know that there is something to look for, we can see it. If we're willing to see anew, something will begin to arise for us to be able to pay attention to. But we have to be open to it. We have to be willing to do that. So, the fundamental principles that unity is founded on, the fundamental principles, spiritual principles, so they are fundamental statements of truth about the absolute. Yes? That's what they are. Our first prime, like the mother of them all, you could say, is there is only one power and one presence. There is only one thing happening. One thing. Nothing is outside of that one power and that one presence. You're not the exception. We sometimes feel like we're the exception. Everyone else is holy, but me, oh no, I'm the exception. Right? So there's only one power and there's only one presence. There's only one thing that is actually happening everywhere. And we, naturally, if there's only one thing happening, then guess what? We're it too. Right? We are divine expressions of this one power. So that means that we have available and accessible to us everything that is that one power. It is present for us because there's only one thing happening. And our third principle is that as those divine expressions, we're creative. We are creative. The way the allness that is creative, we are creative. And the way it shows up for us is through our thoughts and our beliefs. Our thoughts and our beliefs. Now, don't get caught up on this idea when I say thoughts and beliefs that I'm just talking about sort of this mental understanding of something, right? It is not just your mind that is creative in this process. When we are truly transformatively creative is when every dimension of who we are, our mental understanding, our emotional understanding, our psychological understanding, our physical understanding, there's memories in your body temple. All of this together creates our thoughts and our beliefs. Right? It's all of it. And that is a creative process. How they show. Now, if you want to know what your thoughts and beliefs are, look at your life. Because you are creating your life. So if you want to know what you believe, if you want to know what your thoughts are, look at what you are living. Because that shows you what it is that you actually believe. And affirmative prayer and meditations are tools that align our understanding with our true nature. Okay? This is how we look at our life and we go, oh boy, I got a lot of lack going on over here right now, right? That's what I'm seeing. That's what's coming up for me. So how do we begin the process of transformation? How do we begin to allow the creative being that we are to be transformed through truth principles? The most powerful processes, affirmative prayer and meditation. Meditation allows us to become still, allows our sense of personality to kind of fall into the background, which is what it brings the spiritual perspective front and center. It allows us to have an experience of what it means to be truly aligned. And when we activate affirmative prayer, what we're doing is we are taking that experience of alignment and we are becoming creative with it. We are saying, this is what I want to create. This is what I am knowing as the very truth of my life. This is how I am showing up. And then the last one is that we got to live into this truth, right? We have to live into this. We're never done. The one power and one presence is infinite in its expression. So your understanding of that one power and that one presence is infinite in your experience, right? It's an infinite. Why isn't that cool? I mean, I think that's kind of awesome personally. So when we embrace what Marley Cyrus calls the climb, I would call the process of life. That we say yes to the evolution of life as us. We live the truth we know. And at every moment, the invitation is that we can know more. And as we know more, we get to evolve and we activate the principles in new ways. We have a new understanding of them, which guess what? Deepens our understanding of truth. Deepens our capacity to live from that spiritual perspective. Now, as I said last week, it does not mean that we're still not going to get the diagnosis. It does not mean that, like my friend Joe, who passed away 2 weeks ago, that grief and sorrow are not going to touch our hearts. It does not mean that we're necessarily going to get everything we think we want. But it does mean that we are able to navigate the terrain of life. We're able to navigate the experience of that unevenness. The floor drops out from underneath us. The floor rises up to celebrate us, right? All of it is transitory. All of it is going to change. And when we can stop resisting that, when we can embrace the fact that life in our human understanding is about change and transformation, and that the guideposts to support how that change and transformation looks is based in spiritual principle, then it's like we have everything we need to show up as more love, as more joy, as more grace, as more beauty, as more light. This is who we're called to be. So when we hit those moments where everything seems to be right here, right in front of us, whatever that looks like, transitions we're in, change, the life experience, maybe we gain something, maybe we have a success of something, maybe there's illness, whatever it is that is so front and center in our consciousness, what we actively do through prayer, through meditation, through coming together just like we are right now. Ben looked at me and said, there's so much love, and that is healing. Because that love it's not the emotion of love, right? It's the fact that there are people here who came to see him, to really see him. Not to see his human thing, to see the divinity that he is. And when we do that for each other, it's powerfully healing. So we want to go from where this stuff is so like right in our face to that. Where the truth and the absolute, you like that? It's good, right? Yeah, I know, I'm kind of proud of that. Okay, so the truth and the absolute are what are front and center. That is where we place our attention. That is where we place our focus. We don't deny what we're in the midst of in our human experience. I want to be really clear. I'm not talking about a spiritual bypass. I've seen those people, right? We are like, how are you? And they're like, oh, it's all good. And you're like, no, that's not true, right? It's sometimes, oh, it's all good is like code for it's all gone to hell, right? Really, right? It's exactly how we use it. So the invitation is that when things are stirred up, when we're in the midst of some sort of challenging human experience, that we don't deny that we're in the midst of it. You guys saw me crying up here last week as I talked about Joe. I'm not denying that I have grief, that I have loss. But the truth is that my grief and my loss is in direct proportion to the love that he and I had. And I wouldn't give that up for anything. Truly, anything. And that's a spiritual principle, that nothing is more powerful than love. That's a spiritual principle. That's activated in my life. And that allows me to breathe a little bit. As I cry, as my heart breaks open, it allows me to breathe. I get to reach out to other people. If I can't hold it for myself, the prayer chaplains, I sent up the red flag, right? When I was in LA, when Joe was making his transition. And the prayer chaplains just stepped up, stepped in, held, supported. I couldn't do it for myself. I was struggling to keep this perspective. That happens to all of us. We don't have to pretend otherwise. We don't have to be some like spiritual perfect, whatever, like I'm always seeing it perfectly spiritually. I have a teacher who calls that our spiritual ego. And she says it's trickier than the regular ego, which I get, right? Our spiritual ego is like, oh no, Om Shanti, right? We don't have to pretend that it doesn't hurt. We don't have to pretend that we're not lost in this moment. But what we want to do is also remember that it's just this moment. It's only this moment. Because pain shifts, moves, changes. The invitation is always to keep fresh before us our moments of high resolve. What are you committed to? Are you committed to the pain and suffering? Because people choose that. They choose to be committed to pain and suffering. Or are you committed to these ideas of freedom and love and joy expressing as your life? So I'm going to close with this final piece because Howard Thurman for me, if you haven't read any of his work, I invite you to read Meditations of the Heart, his beautiful book. He introduced Martin Luther King to the ideas of nonviolence. And it's often said that without Howard Thurman, there wouldn't be a Martin Luther King. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in fair weather or in foul, in good times or in tempests, in the days when the darkness and the foe are nameless or familiar, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. So let's take this into our time of meditation.